All right, guys, welcome back. We are now in episode 3 of our 3-part series, and this is a series that is dedicated to marriage amidst parenting and entrepreneurship and how to navigate the difficult intersection of all of those things. So, we spent our first episode talking about connection and our second episode talking about communication. We've talked through things that Eric and I do both together and separately, how we communicate, hacks that we have, and different things that we do in our marriage. And so today we're going to talk about growing together. In the last episode, we referenced the importance of being a team and having a team dynamic in your household and how to really be a good teammate to your partner and really build that mindset for yourself and your relationship and your family. And so today we're focused on the future. We're talking about how you can grow as a team. And one of the things that often comes up with my clients, who are either like equal partners in like the financial contributions or the breadwinners of their family, a lot of them being the breadwinners. And we talked about, navigating that in itself. Eric had a lot of great things to say in the last episode. But one of the things that comes up for a lot of these women is feeling like, the growth trajectory is different and wondering how they can foster ambition, if their partner is maybe different than them or has a different timeline than them. And I think that we have a lot to say about this as a couple in our own differences. But the emphasis of today is really to teach you and your partner how you guys can continue to grow together instead of growing apart. So I would love to start by asking you, babe, what do you think that we do well, or how do you think that we help each other to stay evolving and like reaching for the goals that we have?
I can't speak for everybody, but I think there is a innate desire in both of us to want to get better. And I think that it's kind of a chicken or egg scenario here, because I think we are such a great couple and we have had so much success together as a couple, because our marriage is successful because we always demand more of each other. And there has been moments in the past where if one of us is not, meeting our potential in these areas, our partner, it's usually, if I can be 100% honest, it's usually Kelsey telling me I need to do things better. But there have been moments, and maybe not in regards to business, but in our relationship, where I've asked more of Kelsey. And so I think that it's really important that you at least foster your own desire to improve. And it doesn't have to be in business. That's great. Business can be one facet you'd like to get better at. But for the most part, I think that you should always be striving to improve multiple facets of your life. And Kelsey has always been great at asking me what my goals are, what my vision is, what my dreams are, in regards to pretty much everything about our life. And we talk a lot about our future together. And I think I'm a big believer in vision. I'm a big believer in dreams and trying to. Do you mind? You're distracting me. I'm a big believer in picturing things in my head long before I do them, and I think Kelsey is too. So we often we often spend a lot of time talking together about what we can do better and how we can improve it. I think it's really important that you spend time with your partner talking about these things.
Yeah, I think you brought up 2 really important things that I want to touch on that I think it's important to just take away. And one is just fostering and being okay with having standards for accountability. I think that a lot of relationships fail or become disconnected because it goes back to communication, to where it's like you're afraid to ask more of your partner because it feels scary to ask more of your partner because you never want it to come off like you're not enough as you are, right? Like that's when you love somebody, you never want it to feel like that. And I think oftentimes being on the receiving end, it can feel like that. So I think a lot of times women, or men, don't express like, hey, I need more from you because they're afraid of like making somebody feel bad. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you have a standard that you both agree upon, that's like, I need you to hold me accountable to this. And I know that I've used those words to you previously, to where it's like, okay, I need to, I need you to hold me accountable to this because I found this thing in myself, that's pattern that I'm trying to break, or this change I'm trying to make in myself, to where it's like, even, we touched on one of the episodes about me being critical, right? And it's like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing that because it's just like subconscious at this point for me. So reflect that back to me, hold me accountable in those instances. And so I think fostering that accountability is really important, like being somebody who says like, hey, I want you to hold me accountable, because at the end of the day, a lot of people don't want to be held accountable, right? Like you want to be able to have the freedom to, revert back to old patterns or do the things that you've always done. And that keeps you in the same spot. So I think that's the first part, is like really just having that be a part of your relationship, to where it's like, as a team, we hold each other accountable. And so knowing that, what are the standards that we're setting? What are the important things for us to be representative of? What are your goals? What do you want? And that way, as your partner, you can be like, hey, I love you, and you told me you wanted this thing, and you're not doing what you said you were going to do. And it's from a place of love, to where it's like, I want you to feel fulfilled. I want you to feel like you're evolving, and not from a place of you're not good enough. And so I think accountability and just fostering that, and like having open conversations about how to hold each other accountable is really, really important.
It's a really tired cliche that you see perpetuated a lot on social media, a lot of times for comedic value, but I think in any sort of piece of comedy there's always a hint of truth. And it's where it goes both ways, but it can be a physical thing, it can be a business thing, wives complaining about their husbands, not complaining, but just pointing out they're getting out of shape, or that they spend tons of time doing whatever their hobby is instead of paying attention to them. Vice versa with the guys, I mean, it's a touchy subject, especially on social media, but like when the guy complains that you're not having enough intimacy, all these things, it's all on you. Like, that's your responsibility to bring up, not to make a reel about it and complain about it. Like, don't just be mad about it. It's just
passive aggressive.
Right, don't be passive aggressive. That's not going to lead to anything good. Trust me. You have to speak up, and you have to communicate these things. Obviously, tone matters. We've talked about before. Delivery matters. But I think that the worst thing you can do is to, whether you're making a reel about it or a TikTok or whatever about it or not,
or just complaining to a lot of times you take it to people outside of that person.
Yeah, that's not productive.
Like, if you're complaining about your husband to your sisters, like, say that to your husband.
Yeah, why would you waste the time?
Like, give them the opportunity to step up.
Yeah, if you're a man and you have an issue with your wife, why are you complaining to your boys about it? Why are you complaining to your coworkers about it? Maybe it's because you like that echo chamber because everybody else is doing it.
Sure.
That doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. It's not going to lead to anything.
Yeah, it's not productive at all. And I think that's the thing, is like, if you really want to see change in any area, you got to do hard stuff. Like we had this conversation, was that last week? We were leaving the sauna, and I was like, I just had this thought that like literally everything that has a good reward on the other side of it, you have to do something that feels like shit.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. You gotta be uncomfortable.
Like, I think it's like, it's never comfortable, where Eric and I have talked about, intimacy in marriage. And it's like, as a woman, one of the things that is like there's things that press your gas pedal and there's things that press your brake, which if you're a woman and you are struggling with intimacy or just your relationship with sex in general, I highly recommend the book Come As You Are. It's by Dr. Emily Nagoski. We'll make sure we put it in the show notes and in the references, but this was actually recommended to me. Do something about your dog. This was actually recommended to me by a sex therapist that I went to because of my previous history and relationship with sex, and I wanted to build a better relationship so that would help our relationship. And so all of that being said, I don't think it was ever comfortable for Eric to like be forthcoming about his needs, and like that's not a conversation that anybody wants to have, but unless you know, you can't fix it. And so really it goes back again to communication, but goals are the same thing. You have to communicate about the things that are not working for you, and then you need to communicate about the things that you want to do, and then you need to ask for accountability around those things. So what are some things that we do when it comes to like our shared vision, goals? What are some things that we do or that have maybe helped you or you think have helped me in actually achieving goals and kind of being on the same page?
I think the simplest thing is just to check in, just like with anything else, where you go, hey, what are your goals for? Someone's getting annoyed by it. I'm like, I'm not thinking about that right now. What are your goals for the next year? I'm like, oh, well, now that you mention it, maybe I should think about that. But that's the accountability aspect of it. Like if you're not, it's with everything, if you're not thinking about doing it, then your partner has to kind of prod you a little bit in a positive way to get you moving in that direction. And I think that's really important because there's so much going on a day-to-day basis here, week-to-week basis, so many things happening. It's very easy to lose, your connection with your partner, but also your connection with yourself and your goals. If you are a parent, you know how that is because you live for your kids most of the time. Like we talked about before, the vacations, the trips, the time to reconnect, it's really important because there's just so much time over the course of the week where you're just, picking kids up, taking kids to, gymnastics, making their food, just taking care of them, keeping them entertained, taking them outside.
Making their food, that's going to go directly in the trash when they don't eat it.
They're going to complain. And he says, I like noodles. I'm like, you literally like noodles 2 days ago, so I'm not sure what I need to do.
Make it make sense.
Yes. And so these things, it's really easy for things to get lost. Just like we addressed previously, when you're working all the time, it's very easy to lose sight of what you and your partner, lose sight of that relationship. It's very easy to lose sight of your own goals and your own mission. And I think it's really important that you have somebody next to you who keeps you on that track. It's not their job to motivate you. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just accountability is much different than motivation. You're going to have to find your own motivation, but it is great to have somebody to kind of remind you of what your goal is and to keep you on that track.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with the motivation too, because I think that yes, accountability, and yes, you need to ask for accountability and be open about like what you're striving for, what you want to do, have those like growth oriented conversations. I also think it's really important that you like preface like what you're seeking in conversations or at any given time, to where it's like, I know that I can go to Eric and be like, I'm really struggling with like my thoughts around this, or I'm struggling and feeling like I'm good enough to do this, or in really just being honest about your feelings and prefacing it. One of the things that I've asked from Eric that we've learned how to do is, before we go into a conversation that may be like that is a heavier conversation, whether that's asking for something or spilling feelings or whatever, I asked him, can you please let me know like what role you need me to be in? Because I think that's another difficult part that a lot of people don't talk about, is that if you are an entrepreneur, you're a problem solver. And so your natural response to everything that anybody brings you is to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And so what I figured out is like, he doesn't need me to always solve his problems. He needs to learn how to solve his own problems. But he's coming to me and would be like voicing just feelings around a situation. My brain would go to, oh, I need to fix this for him. And so then it became like a strange situation to where I'm like, am I your wife? Am I your coach? Am I your, who am I? And so by us implementing the rule of like, okay, let me know who you need me to be, or let me know like what you need before you go into this, then it allows me to be like, oh, okay, he just wants me to listen. Like I can receive and just like listen and hold space for him, and that's all he needs. Or if he's like, hey, there's a business issue, like this, then I'm like, okay, let me put that hat on. And so I think as women, and it works for both sides, right? Like, but if you find yourself kind of like torn between trying to play out these positions, or if you feel like you're trying to shoulder the load of like all the responsibilities, that's something that I think has been helpful for us.
Yeah, there was a lot of times in the past where I would vent to Kelsey without prefacing what I needed from her, and it created some strain in the relationship because it felt like I was using her as my therapist, which wasn't my intention. I was just talking. And once we started kind of doing what she talked about, going into these conversations with these expectations from each other, it got a lot better. I also learned over time to compartmentalize better and work things out in my own head before, speaking out loud, because in many instances, there was nothing to be gained from me belly aching to Kelsey. If there's a practical solution to things that I need to bounce an idea off of her, that's one thing. But nobody really, if I can be perfectly honest, nobody wants to hear you complain unless your complaining is basically asking for help or asking for a solution. If you're not going to try to find a resolution for whatever's ailing you, you should probably keep it to yourself, or the much healthier way to go about things would be to try to formulate a conversation where you can get help from your partner. Don't just complain to complain. Don't just bellyache. Be like, hey, I'm having a hard time with this. How could this be? Could you help me with this? Could you give me some insight here that might help me deal with these things a little bit better, instead of just treating your partner as a therapist, which there's a time and a place for that, but it gets old really quick.
Yeah, and it goes both ways, right? Like you said, there's things that we have to do to evolve as people, and I think that kind of brings me to the next like little topic that I want to talk about in this. What are things that you think are like non-negotiable for continued evolution for you personally? Because I believe you can't evolve as a team if you're not evolving personally.
What do you mean? Could you elaborate on that?
So what I'm asking is, my belief is that if you're growing as a team, right? If we are a growth oriented, anchored into our vision, like we're sharing goals and we have our own goals to foster that. I believe that we as individuals have to do things to make that happen. So there's things that we do as a team, right? And we've talked about those things, to where it's the accountability, it's the checking in, it's having the conversations around what are our goals, what are we doing, how are we doing it, and actually having those conversations. But then what are we doing as individuals that then allows for that?
You kind of stumped me with this one. I'm not going to lie. I would like to hear you answer your own question, and maybe that would help me, because I guess I'm just right on in the teamwork zone in my brain, and I'm just like, I don't really understand what you're asking.
Well, a team is only as strong as its individual players.
What do we do? You're asking, what do we do?
So what do you do? What do you do? What's non-negotiable for you for your own personal development?
Oh, okay. But you used way too many words. My feeble brain could not compute that. I think that, this is going to be such a meathead answer, but fitness is probably a commitment to fitness is probably the number one thing. I know some people are going to scoff at that, but that is only because a lot of people don't realize the link that your physical health has with your mental health. There are plenty of people out there who convince themselves they're happy and they're fine, but physically they are not. And I think that for me, if I set the day off by treating my body right and moving and sweating and exerting myself, the rest of the day gets that much easier, gets my mind right. Kelsey can speak to this. She was just sick recently and her mental state suffered greatly just from not being able to work out. We know we're not getting fat. We know we're not getting out of shape. We know it's not going to, we're not going to lose it in like a week. It's not going to happen like that. But it plays an important part in our mental health. And if your mental health isn't good, then you are not going to be able to execute every aspect of your life the best. When I exercise consistently and I eat well most of the time, I am a better parent. I'm a better man. I'm a better business person. Every facet of my life gets better. And I know there's like this big alpha male mentality movement now in the fitness world. Everybody's like trying to outdo each other with the cold plunges and like the 10-mile runs and all that stuff. It's not about that. It's about getting up, or maybe you have to do it at night. Whenever you can get it done, we can't do it at night. There's absolutely no way. But you got to get your mind, get your body right first before you get your body gets right, your mind gets right. And even not to get too sciencey, but like there's plenty of research done that now on the gut is like the second brain. So if you're mistreating your gut, if you're having Gatorade and taquitos for breakfast, your brain is not going to operate effectively. Or as much as I love Starbucks, if you're getting breakfast at Starbucks, you're doing yourself a disservice, okay? Get coffee at Starbucks, get breakfast at home. Don't get breakfast at Starbucks. So it's going to set you, I'm surprised it took me this long to start talking about fitness, because one of the things that you see so much in social media, and I think this has even happened to us in the past, where one person's like, I want to get in good shape, and another person's like, okay, I'll hold you accountable, and inevitably that falls apart because they are like, I want to eat pizza. I'm like, oh, I want to eat pizza too. Many times, I am the one steering the ship, because Kelsey will say, so where are we ordering pizza from? And I'm like, I'm not ordering pizza. I'm eating this food in the fridge. And she's like, oh, okay. She won't.
That's such a good example, though, because I think that's a very real life example of like the accountability, to where it's like, it's not just about the big things, because the big things of like who we want to be are all cumulative from the small things that we do. And so eating well, not eating pizza, it's just the decision part of it about like, let's just order.
There's a lot of things like that.
But
like, I used to complain that I stopped reading, and Kelsey's like, just read before you go to bed. And I don't remember when I started doing that. There was a long time where I didn't do that. She would always read. I don't know, what was I doing? What would I even
going to sleep? Yeah.
Did I just go to sleep?
Yeah.
And ever since I started reading before bed, I sleep better, and I've caught up on reading, which I've always loved reading. It's just hard to find. It's one of those things that ends up on the cutting room floor in the grand scheme of things. But she motivated me to do that, and she got she told her mom to get me a Kindle, and now I read before bed every night, because I couldn't do it without a Kindle because my eyes they're shot. But that's another thing. Like, that's your partner says, I wish I did this more, and you tell your partner that, they're going to tell you, hopefully, give you a solution to that. You're probably not going to be that receptive to it initially, because it's going to require a change in your routine. But once you get into it, I think you'll for the most. I can't speak for everybody, but all the things she's suggested I do. I've liked the change, and fitness is a big one for a lot of people. And sometimes you guys got to do it together. We've always been, I guess, individually motivated to work out, but there's also, in my opinion, a huge amount of obligation, out of respect, that you stay in good physical shape. You don't have to be ripped or jacked. You don't have to be like a fitness model, but to stay in good health for longevity's sake, but also good shape to be physically attractive to your significant other. But I think even if she'd like me if I was 250, I would like myself at 250, and I wouldn't execute the way I need to at 250. So you need to find your their own sweet spot between what's your. I mean, she just wants a bear, but it's just like I'm not gonna bulk to 250. I don't want to throw away a whole other wardrobe, but
No skinny guys.
yeah, she doesn't like him skinny. I get that. That's a lot of it's a lot of work to say skinny. So I'd rather just not. But yeah, things like that happen all the time in relationships, and it can cause a lot of stress if the conversations aren't handled with care.
Yeah. So fitness is a big one. Your own personal routines is a big one, kind of coming back to the question of like what we do as individuals that helps us as a team. And I think all the things that you do for yourself help foster like respect for yourself. Like that's the thing about fitness is, yes, there is the part of it that is taking care of your body and taking care of your mind that is important for those things, but then there's also the reality that like when you show up for yourself and keep promises for yourself, you're also building your confidence, your self-confidence, and your self-esteem. And I think that's one of the things that we haven't touched on that's really important for continued growth, is that if you start to backslide in keeping your promises to yourself, not holding yourself accountable, not have any goals, you kind of become complacent, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, or all of the above, then one person becomes complacent and then the other person will be like, oh, then I can become complacent. And then you end up just not.
Or the partner resents the person who's complacent because they're like, I'm working so hard, and this person is
like, get your shit together.
And wife, they're doing whatever. It's supposed to do life, and they resent that because when you work really hard and your partner doesn't, and they're just kind of happy to kind of just maintain the status quo, you can kind of resent that because I'm busting my ass. What are you doing?
Yeah, you can really like set this standard of like, us getting up at 5 a.m. to take care of ourselves, like mind and body, is I think something that neither of us loves. Like we would love to just sleep instead, but it's just, we know the importance of that for our bodies, for our minds, but also out of respect for each other, out of respect for ourselves, and out of respect for just the future together, because it really does roll into so many things. So yeah, I think that, taking care of your body, having time for physical wellness, having time for mental wellness. For me, it's my morning routine with journaling and reading and working out. And those are the things that like anchor me. And those are the things that build my self-confidence. And those are the things that, like Eric was saying, he does the things that he does, and that makes him feel confident and feel like a better man, so then he can show up and serve our family. And the same thing goes for me, to where I can show up and serve my family and my clients because I'm serving myself first. And that part is what gets lost. And when it's like you're trying to operate as a team and you're trying to grow businesses and raise kids, the first thing that people do is put themselves on the back burner.
Yeah.
And I think that really what people don't realize is how big of a hit that takes on your marriage. Because at the end of the day, everybody would be lying if, you marry a partner. There is an element of like physical attraction that's important, to where it's like, that's, you need to have respect for your body, and you need to think about like, yes, our bodies change, especially as women, and like we have kids and we gain weight and there's hormones and there's all sorts of things involved. And like Eric said, I don't think we need to be like fitness models, but I think there's something to even the effort, right? To where it's like, if Eric was getting up at 5 every morning and I was, sleeping and not working out, I would feel like shit. I would probably look like shit. And then those things would make me not show up in the best way possible.
And I personally, speaking from perspective of myself, I don't know how, I can't be talking about where other men coming from, but if you did that, I would be less attracted to you, because I find somebody who, one of the main things I loved about you from day one was that like you were you were set in your routine, and you were a hard worker, and you weren't complacent. Like you were very adamant about improving. And if I was with somebody who didn't share, I could never be with somebody who didn't share my desire to maintain some sort of routine like that makes you better. There's been periods in my life, like I've talked on my own social media about this before, where my diet's been horrible, I'm just eating whatever, but I've never not gotten up to work out. It's part of my, it's not, I don't even think about it as a routine anymore. It's instinctual. It's just what I do. It's a non-negotiable you talked about. And for somebody to just kind of let a non-negotiable, if you just decided one day to not want to wake up at 5 and not work out at all, I'd be like, it's not good. I'm definitely have a conversation about that. Because it's not about like, I'm staying in shape, so why aren't you? It's not about that. It's about like what is going on where these things that were so important to you are no longer important to you. And even if you were never that kind of person, if you're having trouble finding that desire to treat yourself better, you have to ask yourself this question: why isn't that important to you? Because it should be. It should be important to you and your partner. If you care about your marriage, and you care about your business, you have to be at your best, as best as you can be, and part of that is your health and fitness. I really do think a lot of people do themselves a disservice by not at least trying. You do not have to do everything that you see these fitness accounts talk about. It's just like Kelsey said, just try. Apply some effort. Just treat yourself a little bit better, and I think that you would find yourself in a much better situation. I think compromise is a big part of this too. I don't know if you were going to talk about this, but compromising when you're in a marriage or a partnership is really important, because I would love to wake up at 4 a.m. every day. She would not. She would love to sleep much more. I've convinced myself I don't need that much sleep. However, as I've gotten older, I realize I do need a little more sleep, but I don't.
Science says the average adult needs between 7 and 9 hours of sleep.
But I'm built different. I think the science.
He's not a human. He's actually an alien.
The science does not take into account that I am built different. So they weren't talking about me. I'm good. But the thing is, like, at a certain point, she was like, you need more sleep. And also, I'm not trying to get up that early. And when you wake up, this is the lightest sleeper on planet Earth. So I'm waking up when you wake up. One time I got out of bed, my ankle popped and it woke her up. Like, what? It's my sleep mask falling on the ground.
That's all of my listeners who are moms, they get it, because that's just what happens. We're on high alert.
But yeah, I was fine with it. After a while, I realized she was probably more right than she was wrong when it came to that extra hour of sleep. And we are happier. And I think that you have to compromise. You have to find, she's, don't let her fool you. If it was up to her, we would definitely be ordering pizza every week. I could, we were just talking about this yesterday. I'm disgusting. I'll just eat dry chicken breast and rice and vegetables and plain ground beef with some ketchup on it. Like, I don't care, because I know I'm going to eat something good on the weekend. She's a little more high maintenance. So,
and by high maintenance, it means
she wants food with flavor.
I want, food
She's
with
not
flavor.
a robot.
And also, like, kid food, like chicken nuggets and mac and cheese.
So there's a
But I don't eat those things
No.
on a frequent basis because they make me feel like shit. And I'm married to a partner who, even if I was like, oh, but I really want that, he'd be like, do you? And I'll be like, oh, no, never mind.
How makes you feel.
Yeah.
But I still buy steak, I still buy fish, things that I wouldn't buy for myself, just because I know that she gets a little fatigued of she eats chicken thigh, she's fancy.
But it all comes back to just the conversation. So accountability, in order to continuously grow together and not grow apart, you have to foster a relationship that allows for accountability. You have to have growth-oriented conversations and be willing to hold each other accountable to the growth that you want. And, again, just communications about what things need to be compromised on. And then I think, in addition to that, just evaluating your individual routines and habits to make sure that you're operating at your highest, because you literally can't grow as a team or individually if your baseline's not there. And I think the baseline is whatever you're doing on a consistent basis to honor your emotional, mental, and physical wellness. And so I think a lot of people on that end will run into the feeling of, I don't have enough time for that. And that's where you have to really reevaluate your values and your priorities, because a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in all 3 episodes has really been in alignment with like having shared values, because it's not just about a shared vision of like where you want to go and what you want to build and how many businesses or all those things. It's also about like, what do we value most and what are the things that we share values on and how are we representing those as a team, but then also individually. So anything else that you want to add, babe, before we wrap up this series that you think is important for women and their partners to have to continuously foster growth in their marriages?
I think this should go without saying, but I'm going to keep it as short as possible. Women, I'm talking to you men, they can't read our minds. And I don't know if you know this or not, but it goes both ways. You have to communicate. We are mind readers. We can't, I mean, even us, we've spent so much time together. We know where we're going. We know each other really well. Sometimes you got to ask questions. And if you're not willing to ask uncomfortable questions and ask for your partner to maybe go to uncomfortable places, you will never go, or you won't grow. Like you said, everything good, everything with a great outcome usually requires you to get a little uncomfortable, short of a lottery ticket winner, and we know the odds of that. So if you want to grow, if you want to grow together and you want to grow individually as well, you're going to have to, communicate, get some extra accountability, and hold each other accountable.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say before we wrap up here is, this is just an idea that Eric and I have been floating and talking about. And I would love if you're listening. I've talked to my clients about this and know there's a lot of interest. But if you've listened to this series, Eric and I have floated the idea of actually doing a couples retreat. So we don't have any sort of finalized date, location, plan, any of that. We're just in the stages of like gathering interest, thinking about this as a possibility. But the more I think, even doing this series and the more that we have conversations about our own growth, the more that we've thought about like, we really have a really good fucking marriage and have done some incredible things and have so much to share and really think that we could help people who are in similar situations. So if you have any sort of interest in possibly doing that, a couples retreat with your partner, where it would be dedicated to just connecting with other entrepreneur households, connecting with each other, having time away from the kids, if you could please just send me an email or a message and say, hey, that's something I'd possibly be interested in. We're just floating out this idea, and I think you guys are the perfect audience to float this to. So if that sounds interesting to you, shoot me a message, shoot me an email. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this series. I'm sure it won't be the last time that Eric is on the podcast, because again, we just have so much to share and talk about. If you have enjoyed this series, please share it. Please, again, I love messages, feedback, questions. Emails and DMs are always open to you guys. And thank you so much for listening. Peace.